Okay, John chapter 4. So, if you saw in the chat, I wrote the title of a really interesting book called Outrageous Openness by Tosha Silver. So this is, I think, the best book to illustrate what we've just talked about. She is absolutely agnostic. She's an astrologer of all things, right? And in this book, she talks about amazing moments of, I think she's extremely open psychologically, right? She's really what Jesus is talking about here. She's somebody who's constantly attentive and open, watching. And this is a story, like she tells all her little experiences where she, of course, she talks in kind of new agey language, but it's basically her asking the universe for help or for wisdom or for an answer, and then receiving answers and help through everyday moments, right? And of course, doing the same, being also the one who gives answers and so forth. So it's a beautiful book, which I really feel I should read again, because it shows you how a perfectly normal person, right, can walk around in this kind of how shall I put it, absolutely aligned and attuned to the realm of the spirit or to the breath or to the muses, right? So it just shows how this is an experience which all of us can do, all of us can experience, right? This way of receiving a breath, giving a breath, right, in the little moments of life, right? So I really suggest you read this book to really get a sense of a more universal approach to what Jesus is teaching here. This is something that we can all emulate, right, what she's talking about. Okay, let's go to John 4. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the Samaritans so you have an idea. So here's what happened with the Samaritans and why they are so despised by the Jews. So you recall the history by now, hopefully you know, right? Abraham, Egypt, Israel, the judges, the kings, Babylon, right? So they're exiled to Babylon. And it was the custom of the Babylonians, when they conquer a land, they would exile only the elites. So the princes, the kings would go into exile and be kind of re-educated, right? But then the lands were left with the peasants, and what they would do is populate those lands with Babylonians and whoever else, so that the land would become a mixed kind of, there wouldn't be so much of a strong national identity anymore, because people would intermarry, people would become kind of a mixed blood. So there wouldn't be, right? So Israel, if it's full of Persians and Babylonians, and they would bring a few Egyptians to whoever they conquered, they would bring, right, mix it all up so that there's no sense of national identity anymore. And that's how they kept things stable, right, in the lands that they conquered. So when the elites went to Babylon, were left only the peasants, and they brought in, whoever they had conquered. So they had many lands, the Babylonians that they conquered. So they brought in all of these ethnic groups, and they merged with the Israelites. Now, when the Jews came back from Babylon to rebuild Israel and to rebuild Jerusalem and to rebuild the temple, the people who were there, who were all mixed now, and who were part Jewish and part pagan, right? So they were still worshiping God, but in a kind of pagan way, right? So they came and they asked to be part of the rebuilding. And they're called the Samaritans because they're part of a large area called Samaria, which was actually the tribe of, I think, Ephraim was what was left in the middle of the land, right? So they wanted to be part of it, and the Jews said, no, you are impure now. You have become contaminated by these pagans. We don't want you to help us. And that's where the rift came. So the Samaritans were like, really, you don't want us to help you rebuild the temple? Well, we'll build our own temple on our own mountain. And this is the temple that the Samaritan woman is talking about. Mount Gerizim is where they have their temple, right? That they built in response to the Jerusalem temple that wouldn't let them in, right? So that's who they are. Samaritans are mixed Jews, right? They're Jews, but they have other blood running through their veins. And also their religion is mixed. So they are worshiping God, but also they have a few other things going on too, right? So they were considered really kind of contaminated people by the Jews. And so, and there was a lot of hostility between the two groups, right? So they tended to avoid each other. And in fact, to get to Galilee, from Galilee, where Jesus was, to Jerusalem, normally you have to cross into Samaria because it's that big territory between Galilee and Jerusalem. But the Jews were so, they didn't want to merge with, or it was dangerous also for them to cross, but it was also, they didn't want to have anything to do with them. So they would do a huge detour around the Jordan River into, into Jerusalem. So, and that's why it's unusual that Jesus would cross Samaria. Nobody did that, right? And so he still does it. He's like, I need to do this. And he ends up, of course, at the well, right? And so just a little background so you can understand the significance of this. The well is the equivalent of the bar in our modern times. This is where you pick up women. Basically, all weddings, almost so many weddings in the Hebrew Bible started at a well. So this is where you met women, because women would come in groups, conglomerate at the well. So if you wanted to, you know, find a date, you would need to hang out at the well, right? And so when Jesus is sitting there and she comes and he talks to her, that's like he's flirting with her, right? So we know that just seeing a man, a woman, a well, we know there's a love story about to start, right? And indeed, we know that this is what will happen, but in an unusual way. It's not going to be in a kind of a material way. It's going to be a kind of a spiritual love affair, but there is a love affair about to blossom. We know that just by seeing man, woman, well. Love story about to be written. So we should expect that, right? This story is going to be about love and romance, and we'll see how that will turn out for the Samaritan woman. So let's go there. Chapter 4. Okay, so he is there, and so I want to stop on this. This is for me so powerful. And again, remember, we are trying to figure out what is the positioning, right, to receive the breath. In this case, the water, right? So over there was the breath. Now we're receiving living water, which is the same thing. It's kind of a rejuvenation moment, right? So what we want to learn again, right? I'm setting down the goal. We want to learn what can we learn from this story in terms of receiving this time water, right? Or I'll say second breath or water interchangeably, right? This living water or the second breath. What must we do in order to receive that? We saw in John chapter 3, right? The attitude of openness, the willingness to receive and give, right? We'll see that. But here we'll see something even a little better. So watch what he says, right? He begins, just talks to her. Give me a drink, he says, right? And it's interesting because this is the main, I think right here we have to stop, right? Because this will give us the key for everything. Give me a drink, and she refuses, right? She refuses, and what does he tell her? If you knew the one who is standing next to you, and I know, I think Crystal Dulu was kind of annoyed. I was really pretentious, like, if you knew who I was, you know, you would give me a drink. Do you know who I am, right? So it does sound kind of like that, but I agree with you. I'm a little embarrassed too for Jesus. But he says, right, if you knew who it was who was about to give you a drink, you would not, how does he put it? Let me find the exact wording. If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water, right? So in other words, give me water, but actually you should receive water, right? So I want to stop here a little bit. What can we learn from this story, right? And so of course the conversation goes on and so forth, and she's convinced, and we'll talk about that section where he talks about to worship in spirit and in truth. This is an interesting concept, but before I want to stop, what is the connection here between her giving Jesus water and her receiving living water, because they are in parallel in the text, as though they are connected. What would happen if she had refused to give him water and just walked away? What would have happened to her, right? In other words, what is the connection between her accepting to give him water and eventually receiving this powerful, rejuvenating water from him? What do you think? And what can we learn from that, right? What are we to learn from this dynamic for our own acquisition of living water? Crystal Dulu, go ahead.
I feel like I can hear the voice of the church still in my head when I read this, because it feels like what they're saying is like, through acts of service, like through giving, you are actually getting something else in return. So the simple act of giving this man water, you will actually receive something even greater.
Okay, I think, I know you prefaced it by like it was something bad, what you were about to say, but this is, this is really what's happening. This is very powerful. And I want to, you're right on, right? I want to develop this idea a little bit. It is in giving that we receive, right? We hear this at Christmas all the time, right? It is in giving that we receive. I want to talk about that a little bit, because the way I explain it is like this. The metaphysical laws of the universe are inversely proportional to the physical laws of the universe. So what I mean by that is this. In the physical realm, if I take my bottle and I start to pour into a cup that you will drink, what will happen to my water? Tell me. Will I have any left for me?
Less.
No, exactly, less. I'm depleting my water by giving you water. This is in the physical realm, right? Is the opposite in the metaphysical realm. This is so powerful. I just love this. The more you pour, the more you get filled up. This is a metaphysical truth that Jesus is saying, is that in the metaphysical realm, the laws of physics are inverted. Rather than depleting by pouring, you're filling up by pouring, which is what Christodoulou said, right? As you give of yourself, you become wealthier, right? I think this is something for us at any point in life when so this is, again, very secular interpretation. You don't need to be a Christian to pour, right? To pour of yourself. But I think there's something to be said when you come to a point of your life where you feel like you've reached a dead end, like you feel depleted, like there's nothing left, like you're stuck in this situation, you don't see your future, you don't see a way out. The text is saying, what do you have? Give it. And as you give, the little bit you have, it wasn't much. He's just asking for a cup, Jesus, right? Give what you have. It wasn't much. It was just this kind of water from this humble well, right? As you give the little bit that you have in your situation where you're stuck and where you are in a way, you don't know whether there is any future for you, you don't see the end of the tunnel, right? There are moments like this we get like that. The text is saying, look at what you actually have and offer that repeatedly. As you offer it, the tunnel will grow brighter, the walls around you will space out, the darkness will become light, right? That's what the text, this is so powerful and so true, right? People will tell you, I was depressed, I was stuck at home, I was, my life was over. And then I started to mentor this kid or whatever, right? Do some small thing. And the more I did that, the more something in me awakened again, the more I felt myself coming alive. And then this came my way and that came my way and my universe expanded, right? So this is one of the other ways, right? We saw in chapter 3, the ability to be moved and move with the rhythm of the spirit, this kind of intellectual openness. Here we are talking about existential openness, right? Existential generosity versus intellectual openness. If you want to be rejuvenated at any moment in your life, if you feel you're stuck and depressed and it's dark everywhere, pouring a little bit of yourself every day is what will gradually make you come alive again, right? Bring light in the darkness. So very, very beautiful story in my view. And this is actually very interesting because this is a woman who was exactly at that point. She had poured of herself into 4 marriages and nothing came out of it. I mean, you have to put yourself in her situation. This was a woman whose heart was broken, right? After 4 men reject her for unknown reasons, right? But certainly it was they who rejected her rather than her who moved from man to man. It was the men who rejected her. After 4 heartbreaks, do you think she is completely destroyed inside, right? And Jesus is saying, if you want to be healed, continue to love. Don't stop loving. Whatever you see, love, right? And as you continue to love, your heart will heal. If any of us experiences heartbreak ever, the best way to heal is find something to love. Doesn't have to be another guy or another, you don't have to go into a kind of a, what do you call it when you do what is this called when you break up with someone and boom, you go quickly in another relationship? What's that called?
Rebound.
Yes, I'm not talking about rebound. talking about, if you want your heart to heal, find something to do or to love that keeps your heart pumping, right? And this is, as you pour yourself in love, you will receive the healing, right? This is a very beautiful text. There's a beautiful text, I think, in Isaiah, and it says something to the effect, if you want your healing to come quickly, and then there's a list, and in the list it says, help the poor, help the oppressed, and don't turn away from your own flesh and blood, right? It's beautiful. But if you want your healing to occur, we all find healing, right? But quickly, it would be nice, right? If you want your healing to go quickly, keep your heart flowing. What is causing the damage in your heart is the constriction of your heart upon itself. In order to relax the heart and open it again, you have to give of yourself continuously. And that is what will keep your heart from, right, from the heartbreak. So very, very beautiful point here. Any questions on this one before we go to the next sentence, or any comments on this? Okay, so here's the quote I want to stop on. I think it's going to be the last quote because I see you guys are falling with exhaustion. So it's long, these sessions, isn't it? All right, so he continues, where am I? Yeah, here. Okay, then he says, okay, go call your husband, and then she changes the subject abruptly to theology. Good move, smart woman. And then he continues, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know, etc. And then he says this is verse 22, I think. The hour is coming, and now is here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And so Christianity over the centuries has butchered this passage. So I would like to find a way to interpret it differently based on what we know so far. So here he's saying something. I need to first make that clear. You will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. What is he saying? There will be no religion anymore. Religion is not the place where you will find God in the future. He's, projecting in a time which is post-religion, which is where we are in to a certain degree, right? People are not religious. They're not going to church or going to the mosque. A few are, but not most of us aren't, right? So then what? No hope for these masses of people? He's saying, no, there's still a way to worship away from the church, away from the synagogue, away from the temples. And this worship is to worship in spirit and in truth. So here he's talking about a moment in history where God will not be found merely in the temple, where one will be able to connect to God outside of the temples, right? Where the masses of people who do not belong to organized religion anymore will find a way to connect to God and find a way to worship. This is again, the text for me is universal. So what does it mean to worship in spirit and in truth? Let's start with worshiping in spirit. First of all, what does it mean to worship? Let me explain. I would need to go into the Greek, but in the Hebrew, worship, and we know Jesus probably spoke Hebrew or Aramaic with this woman. Avad means to slave, work, surrender, submit. Is a similar idea if we want to go into Islam. as the definition of being a Muslim, which means to be submitted, right? So worship is an act of submission, receptivity. You are the slave, and whatever God tells you to do, you do. That is worship, right? You are the slave, meaning whatever God tells you to do, you do, which is what we talked about in chapter 3, right? To let the Spirit move through us, to let the second breath dictate our words, our actions. This is worship. So I already gave you the answer. To worship in spirit, what does it mean? It means that now you are guided, acted through, like Olivera was saying, by the breath. The breath is moving through you. You have received the second breath, and the second breath is speaking through you, walking through you, touching through you, teaching through you, giving through you. That is the first act of worship, which is open to all. In as much as you're open to the second breath, you can become the vessel for this breath, right? But here is the question. What does it mean to worship in truth? And the church has interpreted this passage to mean, yeah, the Holy Spirit, but, we still need a certain amount of ritual and dogma and, dogma. And truth is dogma here. So it's not enough to be moved by the Spirit. You have to be moved by the Spirit with the right, how shall I put it? I'm losing the word. Yeah, with the right dogma, in the right direction, right? You still need the church to give you the truth so you can move in the right direction. Spirit doesn't really know, needs to be channeled by the church, right? So the church for many centuries has said the truth here is the law, is the Bible, is the priest, is whatever, right? Is some kind of authority that is written in stone that you need to make sure the movements of the Spirit do not depart from that, right? Okay, so I'm not going to go in that direction because there's no basis to interpret truth in that way. In the Greek, let's go to the Greek. Truth is aletheia. So you're going to learn something interesting. This is something I stumbled on, and the classicists in the class will find this. Actually, let me ask you, Greek lovers in the class, aletheia, what does it mean? What is this word built from? Anybody know the two words that this aletheia is built from? Anybody know the story of aletheia, how this word came along in the Greek tradition? Okay. So we know means not, and letheia is actually the name. Make sure I have it. Letheia is actually in the Greek mythology is the name of a river. Okay, so the concept of aletheia is built from two words, one of which is borrowed from Greek mythology. So letheia or lethe, I have to check exactly the name, but it's the word from which letheia is built, is actually a river which flowed in Hades. Hades is the domain of the dead, right? And so the story goes that when you died, you arrived first at that river and you had to drink from it so that you could forget everything that you had been, your identity, your name, anything that made you a particular individual. You had to drink so you could leave those into the oblivion. And then you could enter the realm of the dead as a completely disembodied, disidentified person, no identity, right? You could just be a ghost, right? With no name and no identity. So now that we know the story of the Lethe, right? This river, aletheia, which means not, so no river of oblivion. What is Jesus saying when he says, or John, right? When he says, we will worship in aletheia. Let's see if you can build what that means. Come up with what that means based on this story that I told you. So what does it mean? So we know to worship in spirit is to let the breath move through us. And in truth, meaning in the no oblivion of self. Okay, Crystal Dulu, go ahead.
I think it's like to worship in a way that it feels true to you, like in your own identity.
Oh, I love that. I hadn't thought of it like that. Yes, you worship in a way that is deeply authentic to you. So you're not trying to copy or follow a script or follow a tradition. It's a very unique, particular approach. And it's very biblical what you're saying, because let me just open a parenthesis here in line with what Christodoulou is saying. Have any of you wondered why in the book of Genesis, God describes himself as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? Why not just the God of Abraham? Why do we need the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob? Anybody wonder about that? This three-dimensional name he gives himself. Each time he introduces himself, he's like, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of... Why don't you just say you're the God of Abraham? We got the point. Like, why are you saying then the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob? Anybody wonder about why God goes into these details? This is key. This is connected to what Christodoulou just said. Anybody know? No one knows? Really, you have no clue why God would, why there is a God of Abraham, but also a God of Jacob, and also a God of Isaac? Now two people at the same time. Okay, go ahead. Oh.
I guess to show like the intimacy, to show that he was there with David, he was there with Abraham, he was there with all these other people.
Yes, good. That's true. But there's one more thing, Giannakopoulos.
That he's the God of all, because from Isaac came Abraham, right? No, sorry. From Abraham came Isaac, and then from Isaac came Jacob, and Jacob begat the 12, tribes.
Yes, there's an element of I'm more than just, but think of it. He is God in a certain way for Abraham, and then he is God in a certain way for Isaac, and then he is God in a certain, right? He's revealed differently according to whom he reveals himself to, which is why he has to say, I'm those three. So what Christodoulou is saying, that I worship in spirit, but in truth, it means that it is also a very personal, intimate worship where I am connecting to God in a very deeply personal way and a unique way, right? Just like God connects to Abraham in a way, and then he connects differently to Isaac, and then even more differently to Jacob. Likewise, Jesus is saying, God is not going to be some kind of script you have to follow or some kind of tradition that everyone is doing. You need to make your own encounter, right? You need to find your own path and your own unique experience, your own unique epiphany. Don't rely on what everybody is saying. Make the journey, right? Which is why Christianity in the beginnings was called the way. Find the way for you, right? Find your own encounter. Olivera, go ahead.
When I heard Christodoulou sharing his points, I was thinking, because as you told your story of like there are people who go into this river and then they clean himself of this identity, I would say that the way would be to not have identity. You don't use your identity to serve God or the identification, but instead you give up all your identity and then let God manifest himself through you. And then I think when he says, like, I am the God of Isaac and Abraham, it's because those men were able to let it go of their identity to some extent and let God manifest through his actions. And I think that's the challenge. I mean, maybe there's multiple challenges. I'm not saying that my vision is the right one, but I just want to give another perspective.
I agree with you, but the problem is that the word is aletheia. So means not. So it's not the river of oblivion. You see what I'm saying? So the text seems to be saying that this is a worship where you are not going to lose your identity. You see what I mean? So you're right on some certain other passages, like when Jesus is saying, let not my will, but your will, definitely there's an element of surrender. But here, he's saying you will worship in spirit, but at the same time, so yes, you will be inhabited by the spirit, but at the same time, you will be most profoundly yourself. That's the paradox. Let me say that again, because this is the stumbling block that most of us have to allowing God to take control of our lives. We say, well, if he takes control of my life, where am I? What am I for? Who am I? I don't exist, right? But this he's saying this, when the Spirit takes control, when the breath takes control of you, this is when you will become most truly yourself. This is when you will reach your real calling. This is when you will find your real name. And your true identity is actually will be found in allowing yourself to be entered by this divine presence, right? So let me write this down. So I agree with you, Olivera, and it turns out I agree with you. So let me write it down, right? Our true identity is paradoxically found in our surrender. That's the thing that was for me the biggest stumbling block to surrendering, because I was thinking, well, I don't want some foreign thing to take, control of me. I exist. There must be a reason why there's an ego here, right? And I'm important, and I don't want something else to, right? So this is a paradox that Jesus is saying, is that to the extent that you allow this breath to take possession of you is actually to the extent that you will become most fully yourself, that you will be actually most fully, that you will find your true identity. Whereas before, you're adopting different identities. So Olivera, it turns out that we agree. Do you see what I'm saying? Right? That in the surrender, you find yourself, right? Obviously, right? So beautiful. Okay, guys. Anything else before we conclude on this passage, on this text? Any other comments? Okay. So I hope you enjoyed the book of John and that it wasn't as boring as you thought it would be. We will have a test on Saturday based on John and Ruth. I will put the questions up tonight. And then we'll have a last class on Monday where you'll have a reading assignment due for the totality of the Song of Songs. So we'll do an introduction and study a passage. And then if you want to go further, you can buy the book. So that is the program from now on. Any questions on that? Let me stop the recording.